Welcome to Meet the Game Changers. I'm your host, Rev Kev, and this is the space where we celebrate everyday people doing extraordinary things to change our world for the better. These are the voices and the stories that inspire us to dream bigger and act bolder. So let's get started with today's game changing guest.
This is Meet the Game Changers with Rev Kev, where we dive into the stories of people transforming our world one bold move at a time.
Black mental health isn't just a conversation, it's survival. Every day, people in our community are dealing with trauma, stress, and systemic obstacles, but instead of seeking help, many of us are raised to push through or pray it away. Today's guest, Dr. Kristee Haggins, is a clinical psychologist and professor and healer who helps Black communities break the cycle of silent suffering and reclaim their mental wellness. Let's welcome Dr. Kristee Haggins to the show. Welcome, Dr. Kristee.
Thank you, thank you. It's good to be here.
It is so good to have you, and thanks so much for your willingness to add one more thing to your plate.
Absolutely.
So I just want to get right into it and ask the question, why are so many of us running on empty these days? What's happening?
Mm. Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think this has been an unfortunate experience for many of us for quite a long time. But right now, in the current circumstances, the political climate, everything that's happening in our world, there's can feel like this need to go farther, to do more, to push through. That's part of our experience, kind of on a day to day basis.
Yeah, and now as we are living in a time where, particularly for Black folk and people of color, we're living in a time when it seems like that demand is being heightened with our current political climate. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Of course, the political climate is impacting people of all kind of backgrounds and ages and identities, I mean, intersecting identities. But when we talk and think specifically about the experience of Black people, there's this kind of re-awareness of the fact that we have been seen not for our humanity for decades, for centuries, even. When our current leadership talks about make America great again, right? The question for many of us is again for who, and that's what we are living with again right now.
Yeah, it's really it's a challenge, and there's a weight, for being Black in America. We're living with this kind of weight. A lot of Black people walk through life feeling like they have to be twice as good and work twice as hard and never show any weakness, even under the most challenging of circumstances. And finding a way to address this pressure with our mental health at stake can be daunting, especially given some of the things you just mentioned. So, how do we, first of all, identify the level of trauma and pressure that we might be living through in these times, and then navigate toward healthy ways of addressing it?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that part of what our experience may be is we don't even recognize sometimes that we are in a place of stress and trauma. Again, related to what you were saying earlier, there's this need to push, to go further, to do more. That has been part of our kind of lived experience for quite some time. And so, what that can look like in our lives is not getting enough rest, or not feeling sometimes as though we even have the right to rest, right? Which can be tied again to our history of enslavement and having to work crazy hours and being tortured, right? And traumatized as a result of that. It can also show up in the ways in which we don't take care of ourselves, whether it's through our eating, our nutrition, which then can manifest in health problems and health challenges. It can show up as well in terms of our relationships, right? Our difficulty sometimes with being able to not only connect with ourselves, but to connect with our other people that are in our lives, our loved ones. So we may disconnect from others. We may find that we are in conflict and having challenges in our relationships with each other. Um, and it can also show up in terms of a sense of helplessness, a sense of hopelessness. What can I do? Where can I turn? How can I get the support that I may need so that then I can offer it to other people? So, the way that trauma can show up in our lives is complex, it is multi leveled. Uh, and again, we may not recognize when we are kind of in the middle of all that because we have learned, again, to just push on and to just carry forth and not acknowledge some of these things or recognize them as challenges in our lives.
You and I have a history of responding to moments like this, where we're not even aware to what extent the pressure has built up. I recall in the era of um, the Stefan Clark movement here in Sacramento, California, and how you showed up because Stefante Clark, the brother of Stefan Clark, who was tragically murdered in his grandmother's backyard, he had a mental health episode in public. And it was one of the first opportunities for many of us who live under this kind of daily pressure to realize that racism is a public health issue. It's not simply a social disease, but it affects our public health. It affects us on a health level. And you did something very creative to respond to what was happening then, and you've been doing it now. You created Safe Black Space. Tell us a little bit about the creation of Safe Black Space, why it was important then, why is it is important now.
Absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate you and inviting me to share that information, and also just recognizing that we were, I'll say, born the organization out of the tragic death and killing of Stephon Clark. And yes, Devante was experiencing, I think, very publicly mental health reactions, responses, trauma to the loss of his brother in a very blatant public way that definitely seemed to be fueled by racism or differential treatment because of, Stefan's racial background, and, so as Stevante was experiencing very publicly, kind of emotional outbursts and crying and, um, just various kind of forms of reactions, whether it was perhaps substance use or, just un what's the word I'm looking for? Again, just emotional kind of inability to kind of control what he was experiencing. And so we saw that in terms of him showing up at a city council meeting and hopping on the desk of the city council and the mayor's office during their meeting. He was publicly kind of displaying what many of us may have been experiencing.
No, but that's it right there. It's that private storm that folks are living with, that it's like a powder keg that can be building up. And this is why I think it's so important for us to have this conversation, especially with many folks that I've been talking to. It seems like there's no way out right now. And so that pressure is happening. People still have to go to work. People still have to, navigate the day-to-day challenges of parenting or being in spaces where they may be encountering the larger social population, right?
Yeah.
And do so and still expect to code switch and all of the various norms that have allowed us to uh, normalize ourselves in this society. But what happens when we are unaware, right? That we're not going to be able to contain that pressure. You know what I mean? What happens when it pops?
Yeah, yeah,
How do we get let me be more constructive.
please.
What how do we prevent that from happening by
Mhm,
creating more awareness with it?
mhm. Well, your questions make me wanna go in all different directions, so
Right, right, and I apologize. I
no,
just
no, no, it's good, right? It's good.
got
But
off.
let me back up just a little bit in the sense of, yes, part of what can happen sometimes when we pop, as you describe it, when we go off, as you describe it, when there's outbursts, it is because at times we don't recognize that the pressure cooker is building, and it's building, and it's building. And part of what you had, mentioned earlier was, again, the fact that racism, it is a public health issue. Part of the work that I have done for 30 plus years or so has been around specifically understanding the impact of racism and racial trauma on Black people. And so it's not, to me, doesn't feel like any new news that now is becoming more mainstream or we're becoming more aware of it. But the reality is very real that we can be impacted very similar to what people often know as post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. People are usually really familiar what that looks like or may feel like for someone who may have experienced a very traumatic event, a natural disaster, a sexual assault, right? We know that people have nightmares, they have avoidance around the same kind of conditions, that they may have anxiety and so forth related to that form of stress and trauma. And the same is true when we think about racism and whether it's kind of the people call microaggressions, but the day to day to day ways in which you may be overlooked, not moved up for a promotion, followed around in a store, not believe that you have a particular medical pain or condition and think that you're just seeking drugs, like all the things that happen in addition to the major macro, if you will, events that may happen to us or that may happen to people that we love or that we care about or that we see on the news that can amplify those symptoms and those reactions. And so to get back to your, question about, what happens or how can people not overreact, part of it is like, you know what, when we are living in a society right now that is so sick in the sense of its identities or beliefs about our identities, it makes sense that we might respond in ways at times that are reactive. However, part of I think what some of the preventative measures are just being aware, like, "Oh, okay, I'm not going, quote, unquote, crazy. Maybe I am being gaslighted, if you will, by people who are in the same, kind of work area than I am." Um, and so there's an awareness piece that can be helpful, that can help build a bit of a buffer for when things come at you. And then I think the other strategies are to have places and spaces and people where we can go and talk to about these experiences and not be told, "Oh, you're just overreacting," or, "Oh, that didn't really happen," or, "Oh, I'm sure that person didn't mean it that way." Um, and that's not to say, I guess I also wanna be clear that not everything that happens to us is about racism, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But it does happen, and discrimination is real, and so the more that we can, acknowledge that, know that for ourselves, know that we're not crazy, and then, like I was saying, have opportunities to talk about it,
Yeah.
to address it is really important too.
That was one of the, issues that we faced early on in coming to understand that as we realized we were looking at a city that was under tremendous stress, under tremendous, um that pressure was building,
Mm,
we also discovered that for Black folk, going to a therapist wasn't their first solution. Many of them would come to church, but wouldn't necessarily go to therapy.
mm,
And those that would may go to therapy wouldn't go to church. So we had to try and find some creative fusion to bring it together. Why is there such a stigma
mm,
with and fear maybe with Black folks and getting the mental health support that they want? And can you talk about um, why church may not always be the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is stigma when we think broadly about Black folks seeking help, support, therapy, a clinical therapist to provide assistance around mental health or mental illness. And that is long and it is strong and it still continues today. I think there are multiple factors about why that occurs. I think, again, historically, we have had challenges as a people with systems that have been quote unquote designed to help and support us. So, whether that be, experiences either historically or right that people have heard from other folks who may have sought a therapy or for example, called 911 for a welfare check because they have someone in their home that they are worried about or concerned, maybe suicidal or homicidal. And to have a situation in which mental health is not prioritized or seen as the main issue, where again, people are subjected to violence because of that. There's experiences as well where folks have gone to therapy and actually been hurt, right, by the therapist. And hurt, I mean, in terms of not being believed for their circumstances, being asked to reconsider their thoughts. There's a therapy modality called cognitive behavioral therapy, which has many, many benefits. But if used improperly, what can happen is someone who was Black identified, who was maybe describing an incident of racism and describing their need to protect themselves can be misperceived, and then told to, again, challenge their thoughts and their beliefs, right? Is that really happening? Rather than really taking a look at the context of what's going on. So, one of my colleagues frequently says that not all therapy is healing, and not all healing has to include therapy. And so I always kind of take that to heart in terms of thinking about yes, there can be many benefits to seeking a psychologist or psychiatrist, getting medication if someone really is having severe mental health challenges and illness, like psychoses and hallucinations and paranoia. That medication, for example, can help with balancing out those symptoms and helping that person stay more connected to reality, if you will. And yet there can be other opportunities for people to get support. And again, whether that's through the church, perhaps through coaching, through connecting with loved ones, with elders, with peers who understand, with connecting with spaces like Safe Black Space, where we again have an opportunity to receive ideas and strategies for coping and an acknowledgement of, you're not alone in the process.
Can
Mm.
we just give a little deeper peek into Safe Black Space because
Yes,
it's something I'm very proud of, and I'm very proud of.
absolutely. I wanna go there. I
Yeah,
wanna
I wanna
go
get a little dick
there.
because I think this is why you are a game changer.
Yeah,
That's you have found a way to integrate, I think, the best of all these worlds
yeah,
into a you used the word strategy earlier. Okay, a strategy for our sanity, our sense of community, our sense of belonging.
yeah,
Give us a just if I had to pull the curtain back a little bit and tell people what they could expect in coming to a safe black space environment. What
absolutely,
would they find there? Give you just, take
I
us
will give
a
you absolute
little bit
peek
of it.
behind the curtains. How about that? And then remind me, please, to come back to this idea of spirituality and faith and how it can help and how it can hurt.
Yeah, yeah.
But with Safe Black Space, and even with that, just a comment, I want to acknowledge that the work that we do is based in African-centered psychology, which is around our understanding of ourselves as spirit beings, that there is something that is present in each and every one of us that is moving us, that is leading us, that is guiding us. And as we tap into that power and that inherent worth, that we are then able to make it through any and all things. And so, Safe Black Space, although we don't provide therapy or mental health services per se, we really are kind of an adjunct and a healing place where folks are able to, like I was referring to earlier, have some understanding of what this experience of race and racism has on our lives, as well as what we can do with respect to responding to that. And so, what we do, as we were saying earlier, it was kind of really born out of the tragic killing of Stephon Clark. Our city here in Sacramento was literally kind of on fire and falling apart, right? The I-5 was shut down and Kings games were canceled and city council was
Well,
among
let's be clear. They were shut down because we
protest.
shut them down. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you for the
Yeah.
clarification, right? The people were
Yeah.
like, "We're
Clear.
not standing for this,"
Shut
right?
down. Yeah. Okay.
The people came together from all walks of life and were like, "This is absolutely not okay for Stephon Clark to be killed in his grandmother's backyard, shot and by at least 8 bullets with 20 fired, and holding only his cell phone." And so that, again, prompted this, massive movement here locally and this response that I'm describing as, racial stress and trauma, particularly for the Black community. And so, we really began, again, as I mentioned, with my history and experience as a Black psychologist, was saying, let's pull some people together. Let's offer a healing circle based on some of the other work I had been doing with the Community Healing Network and the Association of Black Psychologists and connecting with Rev Kev and Pastor Joy Johnson. And so let's do it. And we held a circle at Unity of Sacramento in April of 2018. Um, and from there, we have been going strong. So what does it look like? What does a safe Black space community healing circle look like? Well, it's gone through different iterations as we approach our 7th year, but it remains many of the same components, whether we're online or in person. It's about starting from a place of getting us grounded in our cultural roots and our African kind of values and ceremonies. So we always begin with a land acknowledgement, a labor acknowledgement for our ancestors who built this country on their was built on their backs. And then we hold a libation and we honor our ancestors to get us kind of centered in the work and the conversations that we will do together. Um, and then we kind of move through a introduction every time that we meet. We always talk about, well, what is Black racial stress and trauma? Very similar to our conversation today. What does it look like? How does it show up in our bodies? What are symptoms of it, signs of it? How can we be aware of it? We ask people to do a bit of a self assessment for themselves of where they are in terms of that in their lives. And then we always have a component. As well, where we talk, where we break into smaller circles, and it may be 4 or 5 or 6 people together that have an opportunity to, process their reactions and their thoughts. We'll have questions kinda to move us through that, and each month we focus on a different kind of area, so we're very holistic in our, consideration of our healing and our growth. So 1 month, we'll focus on our mind and our mental health. The next month, we'll focus on our bodies and our physical kind of well being. The next month, we'll focus on our spirit and kind of how we connect with our soul. And then we talk about our family and our communities. And so it's kind of this rotating cycle where there's a particular focus. And we address all of those things and try to use really kind of creative and interactive methods to do that. So
Including some drumming. Including some
yeah,
drumming.
drumming, we'll use video clips, music, song, dancing, just so there again are places that we can all connect. And then we always as well follow up with a strategy for self-care. So, recognizing a lot of the racism and the discrimination that we may experience, it's out of our control, right? There's systems, there's institutional things that are impacting us. But what we can control is ourselves, our bodies, our reactions. And so we always teach at least one strategy for how to take care of ourselves in the larger context of what's happening, and then give resources, provide information about how to take care of our communities, where people can go if they need additional support. So
So
That's
real quick, what makes it safe though?
so it's for us by us. So it is specifically designed for and by people who identify as Black. We want to ensure that we have a space as Black people to discuss our experience without anybody else being present, whether watching, observing, chiming in, but where we can be our full and authentic selves.
Got it. Got it. All right, let me come back to something that we talked about earlier, and then see if I can get us to this piece on faith and spirituality and
Sure.
what's happening with churches and such. But DEI efforts are under attack across the country,
Mhm.
and programs are being defunded, policies are being reversed, and workplaces that were once prioritized inclusion are pulling back. And we remember, post George Floyd, all of the support that was coming forth from um, corporations and organizations to say we stand with the healing of Black communities, traumatized Black communities. These rollbacks are happening. What does this dismantling of these programs say to an organization like yours, a safe Black space that's been funded and received support? What are your concerns about this?
Well, dual. On the one hand, what I was speaking about earlier is like, okay, we're rolling back, we're repeating, old history and old patterns, and so it feels disturbing. It's disappointing. It can be overwhelming as well at times to see where we are, to experience what we are experiencing right now with this lack of support, the withdrawing of support of DEI, which again, at its largest messaging is around how can we be inclusive of all people and see the humanity in each and every person. So as I talk about this dual reaction that I have, that there's a part of me that's like, okay, that does feel that disappointment. But on the other hand, I'm like, we are strong and resilient people. And so that aspect of this connection to our ancestors and the recognition that we can and will get through this is also quite embedded, I know, in me. And it also, in many ways, brings, if you will, fuel to the fire, to the passion of the need for organizations like mine, for people who are doing very similar work. And as a brief aside, and yet very relevant, we had a in-person community healing circle this past weekend for Black History Month, and one of the aspects of the circle was looking at the 10-point platform of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And
Mm.
so we had a chance to look at a brief video of Bobby Seale and his working through some of those concepts, and then talking about how relevant they still are today, and people taking ownership who were present to identify a priority for them where they can create change, where they can keep the movement going. Because even now, although that was, I think, 1968, that here we are now in 2025, and many of the issues still remain. And so, how we can again be empowered to do the work, how we can collaborate with other organizations and allies, outside of our community, because we are all getting bombarded by the current situation at hand.
Let me give a shout out to some of our viewers who are streaming with us. So glad you're with us. And I'm seeing some of your comments. Carmen says, while this is very disappointing, Black people will always create spaces of community that are for our own and for others. Keep leading the change. Thank you, Carmen. And we got a greeting from Sabir Rakim Muhammad, who says, grand rising to you,
Yeah.
Sabir. We talked about earlier maybe some of the unforeseen, unintended dangers associated with churches and faith spaces and mental health. You wanna pick that up?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, You know, again, in my understanding as a psychologist and understanding a bit of the literature that I do around the connection between mental health as well as spirituality and faith, that as a people, we have had a long, long history of allowing our beliefs around spirituality or religion to guide us, to uphold us, right? Whether it's from previous, our time before we even made it, to this continent, as we refer to the United States, but from the motherland, from our ancient understandings of Ma'at, and kind of the spiritual groundings of our forefathers, the ancient Africans who knew, of this connection to our spirituality. And through if you consider as well our times of enslavement and the spirituals and the messaging that we were providing to each other through song and through our beliefs and our faith, and how again that church has been, a place as well for political engagement and movements and advocacy for Black people. And so there is a, I think, very strong history and allegiance and alliance that we have had with the church. And on the other hand, people have also experienced major church hurts, right? And church hurts, whether it be from a devaluing of who they are because of their identity, if they happen to be LGBTQI identified, whether it be kind of some of the constraints that folks have felt around how they can live their lives with certain teachings. Whether it's some churches, as you and I sometimes refer to as the fire and brimstone going to hell kind of messaging, that there are again ways in which people have been hurt, that people maybe feel disconnected. And again, if we go back far enough into the understandings as well of our enslavement and how Christianity and the Bible and was used to again devalue who we were to control us. And so church religion can have a very mixed bag for us in our history. And when we think as well about our youth, and some of I always get the time frames wrong, so I may misspeak, but I will say people who are younger than me, um, in terms of their disengagement, if you will, from
Mm.
physically going to church and having different, kind of values. And then, of course, COVID, right? When how that has limited people's realities and abilities to physically be in
So, what
space.
can people like me who lead churches, with an understanding of this history and an understanding of the some of the trauma that can be created by churches, what can people like me and in my position do to kind of counter some of the ways in which uh, people can be hurt by churches and
Mhm.
how church can negatively affect people's mental health?
Yeah. I like that. I like that question quite a bit. I don't know if I have the exact answer for you, but I think part of it is, again, it goes back to awareness, right? So for someone like you, others who may be faith leaders, to understand that this may be folks' experience, being able and willing to talk about that from the platform or from the pulpit or online, and acknowledge that that may be the case. To consider creative ways to engage people, whether if you are a church that is Bible based, to use the Bible and then also make the translation to more contemporary terms and concepts. And then I think, similar to what I was just saying, is considering all the ways that folks can provide outreach to people who may not be connected in a church, and whether that's, providing online services or using social media, to kinda reach out to folks, to, engaging, again, the range of generations and, identities and people
Mhm.
who show up to receive services. I may be wrong, but I used to do some work with a nonprofit here in California that had a spirituality and a psychology kind of program that we were conducting. And I think May is Mental Health Month, which is right around the corner. And so there are and can be found online for faith leaders different scriptures and sermon guides to help kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that can help.
And that's a really good idea, Dr. Christie. I just would maybe offer that as a suggestion. Maybe the Safe Black Space toolkit for faith leaders in
Mhm.
terms of suggested topics and texts
Mm.
that can really support our racial healing and m- regulate, our mental well-being. We got one more comment here from Sam's Eyes. It says, "We are so much stronger tapping into the values of our ancestors'
Mhm.
spirituality."
Mm.
Yeah. And on that note, let's talk a little bit about this very important subject as we kind of bring ourselves to a close here, and that is Black joy as a strategy for resilience.
Yeah.
Talk to
Yeah.
us because we talk about Black pain, we talk about Black trauma, we talk about
We do.
Black stress and strain, but talk about Black joy as
Yes, 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 yes. It is such a, powerful, coping mechanism and reality for us, right? And then I wanna make sure I get back to blessed assurance, so don't let me lose that thought.
okay, okay.
But the idea that, where there is trauma, there is also triumph, and so staying connected not only to, yes, the experiences that we have that are difficult and hard and challenging and traumatic, but also holding on to the stories again of our ancestors' triumph, of our own personal, victories that we experience, and in that is, a willingness to connect with our joy, right? With our laughter, with our babies. And so that is huge for what we know, again, in general in psychology, that negative versus positive thinking, that there is a difference that can show up in our bodies and our minds and our experience when we focus on what is good, what is right, and what is well, and stay connected with our gratitude. And so, Black joy is a huge component and part of that. And part of what we do in Safe Black Space is also, I mentioned we do this education and ideas around how to take care of yourself and your community in the middle of all of the tragedy and the challenges,
Mhm.
but we also always make sure that we're balancing it out with our joy, with what's going right, with positivity, with dance. And so while again, some of our symbols may include some tears, they also include a whole bunch of laughter, and love. There's a terminology that we use called Zola up. And Zola up on we. Zola up is a Kikongo word that really means the activation of love and the
Mhm.
activation of joy, and so that is a huge part of what we do, and um, to close on my comment about getting back to blessed assurance, that I was highlighting our healing circles. That's a primary kind of main modality of what we provide at Safe Black Space. But we also do African drum and dance circles in community. We also do education, outreach, tabling at community fairs, high schools, and so forth to just get the word out about us and the possibilities of what's available for Black people and our healing. And then we also do a book study group, and that's where I will, finish my last comments, is just letting people know we actually have a weekly book study group. It's called Blessed Assurance, and we meet with my mentor, Dr. Linda James Myers, who is a previous president of the Association of Black Psychologists and a elder with wisdom beyond all-knowing that I'm aware of, that ties together our connection with, again, what the ancient wisdom holds and how we can apply it in our lives today. And so, again, it focuses on our spirituality, our psychology, and our joy.
When I think about joy, I think about music, and I just want to ask you a quick, like, rapid fire question. On your playlist, you're in your car, you're on your way to host a safe black space, whatever it is you're doing. But what are you bumping out to on your way to, get your yourself pumped for the day and.
Well, I will play a long list of songs, but my main go-to is "Say It Loud."
Okay,
I'm
James
black
Brown.
and I'm
Okay,
proud.
we got
Yes. I got James Brown. Mhm.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
all right, all right. You got, and I think that that's so important to support you without all the mentating that we do. It just takes us to a place that, we don't have to try and fabricate. It's already done, and the spirit of that, keeps us going. I hope everybody has an incredible playlist to support you in your Black joy. Really quickly, as we wrap up here, um, the importance of not only regulating our own mental health as Black people and people of African descent in the United States, but not being responsible for laboring for that of the larger social order, doing their work. Say a little bit about how important that is and how we don't have to feel guilty when we don't have the bandwidth for that.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good. In our circles all the time, we are constantly having conversations around the importance again of us taking care of us not being um, intimidated by other folks who may say that's racist or that's divisive, for us being blessed by the opportunity to be each other's medicine, and to hold that as a sacred time and space, again, for Black people to be together. And and the conversation frequently is around feeling as though, well, I have to respond to so and so at work, or I have to code switch in this way. And again, the idea of trying to develop some tools and strategies for when to say, no, I can't do that right now, or no, this is time that is kind of geared specifically for me and my people. But it can be hard, and it can be overwhelming. And I know, and just to be transparent and real about my experience, what I do with Safe Black Space, it's just Black people. And there's a different experience when I am in a room with faces that look like mine and all the shades and varieties in which we come. But there's something very unique to our experience. There was a saying back in the 80s that was, "It's a Black thing you wouldn't understand." And there, to me, feels to be quite a bit of truth of that. And the other work that I do, which is not my full time gig, but I do trainings and workshops with, mixed crowds and mixed groups. And it's a different vibe, right? The energy feels different, and how I show up, while I'm always as authentically me as I can be, I am very aware, like, okay, I can't say it quite this way in this room and be. And so it's not our responsibility to have to please everyone or to shift anyone's perspective, but our own. And so I would say just start there.
Mm. It's going to be so important that we reflect over some of the things that you've shared today. How can people stay in touch with you? I just want to make sure that people know how to tap into you and as a resource for our own continued well-being, but also as a resource to organizations that are and companies that are wanting to continue to fly high the flag. What how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, good. Well, so I see there's some information scrolling across the screen, and I'll repeat some of that. But the two easiest ways to reach me is through my Safe Black Space email account, and that is Dr. So doctor and then underscore Kristee Kristee at safeblackspace.org. Otherwise, if you just Google Safe Black Space and go to our website, you send any communication through there, it'll come to me. And again, Safe Black Space, our work, when I wear my executive director hat with that, we are again all about all things Black, if you will. The other work that I was referring to, that relates to other workshops and trainings that I provide, is part of my LLC, which is Dr. Experience Dr. Kristee. And you can see that as well. If you Google Experience Dr. Kristee, you will find me and can reach me through that as well. So I appreciate that and encourage you to check out our website with Safe Black Space. There's resources that are there, it gives information about upcoming events. If you want to join our mailing list, if you want to donate to our cause to help us continue to offer the free things that we do, all of that is appreciated.
And I'm just so grateful that you exist and you continue this important work, and just so beyond proud. And I'm proud that you're a member of my church, Unity of Sacramento.
Yay.
Bring that into our space in such a beautiful way. Just want to quickly acknowledge these wonderful comments from our guests, and I want to invite you to like and subscribe and share today's important conversation. Thank you, Will. Will says, "Thank you for this show and your guests. I always learn something new. Thank you." Carmen says, "You won't break my soul." No, no,
Yeah.
JD says, "Yes, where there is trauma, there is indeed triumph." And Sam's Eye says, "Breath work, movement, and sharing knowledge makes all of the difference." And Kim, wow, these comments are flying. And this conversation is so very powerful and so much needed. Thank you so much for sharing these tools. It is our intention to bring you this kind of riveting content and introduce you to game changers and to inspire you to become one yourself. Dr. Christie, one last word from you. How do you keep hope in times like this?
That's a good one. Again, my faith sustains me. Our tagline with Safe Black Space is actually home, healing, hope. And so staying connected to what I know to be home, the people that I love, and knowing that for my belief system, God is good all the time, despite appearances. So I remain hopeful.
Thank you, Dr. Christie,
Thank you.
founder of Safe Black Space, for joining us. Your dedication, your deep commitment to this work is changing the game one Black life at a time.
Thank you.
And thanks so much to all of you for joining us for Meet the Game Changers. I hope today's programming impacted you to dream bigger, to act bolder, and to take care of yourselves in these times. Until next week, go out there and be the game changer yourself.
This is Meet the Game Changers with Rev Kev, where we dive into the stories of people transforming our world one bold move at a time.